Assalamu alaikum and hello from Sadia Qureshi. I work as a training consultant for multiple educational institutions and the corporate sector. I also have my own venture through which I develop professional skills for educators along with other professions. With SOAR STEM schools, I work as a teacher educator and their training consultant. So the whole idea of making these videos is to facilitate our faculty members and enhance their professional skills when they work in the classroom, when they teach in the classroom. So we have made very short clips focusing on different topics. One of the videos that we have made was about classroom management, what a teacher should be doing when she's in the class, how should she manage the students and the activities in the class, how important it is for a teacher to manage discipline through setting classroom procedures and also classroom seating arrangement to enhance the learning of the students. Today, we are going to talk about the essential role of a teacher in the 21st century. Before we do that, very quickly, let me remind you about a few norms that I would like you to set for yourselves. It is extremely important that you take down notes while you're watching these videos. This is your professional development. Unless and until you take down notes, you will never remember what a session was all about. Please make sure you're maintaining a learning log, which basically means you record for yourself what your own independent learning was from the session. Like we teach vocabulary to our students. As teachers, it is very important for us to know what kind of vocabulary we can use during our conversation and our teaching. So please develop a vocabulary bank for yourselves through when you listen to these videos. It's also very important that you ask questions at the end if there are any questions. And how would you ask questions? You contact your school head, or you can also email us your questions and we will get back to you. A very important request here is please watch additional videos if there are any attached to my video, and also go through all the reading material that I recommend. Again, as I said, this is your professional development and I am there to facilitate you in every possible way. So coming back to today's topic, we will be talking about your role as an effective teacher in the 21st century. To teach is to touch a life forever. And it is said to grab a child's heart, it is important that a teacher touches the heart first. So it's a very common saying, grab a child's heart and the mind will automatically follow. Have that in mind when we talk about the role of a teacher. We're going to find out how to do that. So if you look at this screen here, it says 150 years ago, we began to have schools in part because that's where the information was, and teachers were the mechanism by which students accessed that information. But now the role has absolutely changed. And when it says 150 years ago in our country, I feel a lot of people still have the same mindset where they look up to the teacher. But the role has consistently and totally has been changing, and now it has totally changed because it says, but now thanks to the internet, mobile phones, social media, and so on, students have the same access to information that teachers do. That means that a teacher's job isn't to transmit information, but to equip students with ways to analyze, make sense of, and evaluate the information. So this basically means this little slide totally talks about how the role of teachers have evolved. The new name for the teacher is not a teacher anymore. It is a facilitator, which basically means as a facilitator, how am I going to enhance the students' learning in the classroom? How am I as a teacher going to facilitate by providing support so that my learners, now again, another term, learners, not students anymore. Teachers are facilitators, students are now learners. So what kind of a role should I have to facilitate my learners so they gain the best and their critical thinking is enhanced so that they can evaluate and analyze certain situations? I will be talking about the roles only today, some of the essential roles. The roles of a teacher, you can't really limit the roles, right? But in today's session, I will be talking about few of those important roles. I am not going to talk about the instructional practices today because in the next video, you will come to know how those roles are translated into instructional practices and how the teachers should be practicing through these roles to teach the learners, right? So that's going to come up. So let's start talking about the role of a teacher. Before I start talking about the roles of a teacher, I want you to pause my video here and attempt a worksheet which says roles of a teacher. Please do that first. So let's begin with understanding the different roles of a teacher. The very first essential role of a teacher is of a controller, which basically means how a teacher would control the environment of the classroom. Now, remember, it's not important that a teacher is someone who is controlling the thinking process of learners. By being a controller, it simply means how the teacher will gain attention of the learners and how the teacher facilitates learners to, for example, repeat a certain learned point. As an example, I can say if a teacher wants to teach a new vocabulary word with pronunciation, then the teacher can get everyone's attention and use drilling techniques. And I'll talk to you about drilling techniques when I do instructional practices with you. But when the teacher simply asks the students to listen to her, look at her, and pronounce a certain word, she is controlling the class because the students are looking at her, repeating a certain word, and are also applying that certain word in their sentences to enhance their own understanding and vocabulary. Please remember, as a controller, the teacher should not control the entire class and their thinking all the time, right? So as far as the teacher is developing language, as far as the teacher is teaching vocabulary, as far as the teacher is teaching a concept, a teacher is a controller of the classroom. Moving on to the next role, it is the role of a prompter. Now, a prompter is someone who prompts certain ideas into the students. Now, when I say prompt certain ideas, it basically means that as a teacher, you fill in for some of the words a learner is falling short on. So it's not that you generate ideas, but you kind of stretch the students out of that traditional thinking pattern and add a few variety to the ideas of the students, polishing up the students' understanding. As I said, whenever learners feel short on words, as a teacher, it is your role to fill in words for the words that were lost for the learners. So that's, again, a very, very important role. As a teacher, you will have to go around and see what students are doing, even during group work. And anyone who is unable to participate in a discussion, that's where the role of a prompter comes in. That's where the teacher goes, at times whispers in the ear of a student, at times talks to a group to plant that seed of motivation so that everyone participates. The third very important role is of a resource. A resource, you all understand what I mean by resource. So anyone who provides additional information. So a teacher can actually go around in the classrooms and through communicative approach where the teacher is talking to students, the students are talking to each other, she provides, let's say, links to websites, or let's say talks about how important certain reading material would be, or points out to a certain book and say, okay, if you read on page number 53, you're going to find out more information about what you're saying and read from your textbook, or visit the certain website to understand more about it. So as a resource, the teacher is not only relying on what is given in the classroom, but is taking the students outside, beyond the classroom, to give additional piece of information. So first three roles again: the controller, the prompter, and the resource. The fourth important role, the assessor. We all assess our learners all the time. As an assessor, the role of a teacher is not only to grade and to assess learners, but also to make sure that every point that a learner has said, or maybe has written through a test, an assessment, an exam, a proper feedback is provided. Now, feedback, again, is a very detailed concept, and as teachers, we need to understand how to provide feedback. As an assessor, you just have to remember that every feedback you provide to your learners need to be constructive, which means you start off with the positive points. You talk about the gray areas. Please, I refuse to use the word negative. I refuse to use this word because I feel it is extremely degrading if you say, oh, this is the negative point in you. So might as well just say areas to ponder upon, or the gray areas. And then at the end, talk about the points for improvement. So 3 steps of it, right? So as an assessor, remember, you as a teacher will never make remarks that are degrading for your learners. Self-esteem needs to be the priority, right? For every learner. Okay, so the first 4 roles we've talked about. Next 4 important roles. The next important role of a teacher is of an organizer. As an organizer, the teacher is responsible to make sure every activity that is done in the class is well structured, first of all, well planned, then well structured and well organized. So it basically means how a teacher is going to, let's say, group students. How well the teacher begins an activity, takes it through, and wraps up an activity. Also, more than an activity, how a teacher walks into the classroom, conducts the entire session, and finally wraps up by assigning homework maybe, or reviewing the certain concepts, summarizing whatever has been taught, and then moving out. So as an organizer, it is extremely important that a teacher does planning that is extremely sound and it is well executed. The next role after an organizer is the teacher as a participant. A lot of times I've observed teachers feel that they don't have to participate in certain activities that they've planned. The teacher as a participant sets a very healthy environment in the classroom. So for example, if there is an activity with smaller kids where you are teaching them Simon Says, for example, the teacher can participate. The only point to remember here is that as a participant, the teacher cannot and should not dominate the students. Because if you dominate the students, then their learning stops because they just completely keep on looking at you as a teacher, right? So remember, as a participant, you're not taking sides of any teams. You are participating as one individual with the entire group. So as I said, with the role of a participant, you enhance and you strengthen the environment of positive learning in a classroom. All right, 7th role. The 7th role of a teacher is as a tutor or a helper. Now, you would all understand that as a teacher, of course, this is what you're doing. You're consistently teaching. The role of a tutor and a helper is certainly very, very important, where a teacher is not really teaching a certain concept, but is consistently making sure that every learner in the classroom has understood it. By helping the students, it basically means when the teacher goes around to different students to make sure that everything is clearly comprehended by the individuals. It also basically means that the teacher is paying individual attention and is making sure that the students understand through their own specific needs of learning. So the role of a teacher as a tutor and a helper is more of a coach, where the coach does not leave any learner behind. So as a teacher, you take all the learners together and make sure everything that you have said and taught is clearly put across to the students. And I will talk to you about how do we check their understanding in some time. The last role of a teacher is of a friend or an acquaintance. Now here comes another problem, another myth where people feel, oh my God, I can't be a friend to my student. By being friends, it's not that you're actually sharing some personal stories with the students. The last and the most important role of a teacher is as an acquaintance and as a friend. Now, there's a myth that I've been listening to, and it is, oh, I can't be a friend of my student. Now, by being a friend, it basically means that you have a bonding of trust and confidence with your students, where the students can come up to you and share their experiences outside the classroom. Remember, it is so important for a teacher to talk about the non-academic issues of students too. Now, I'm not trying to say that you bring in all your stories and talk about whatever you've been doing the previous day, but I definitely feel as a teacher, you should at least ask how the students have been. If someone was absent from your class the previous day, as a friend, as an acquaintance, you should ask what was wrong with the student. You should actually make the student feel important and say, oh, we really missed you yesterday because we did this activity and you weren't a part of it. And as a teacher, I just want to know I really missed you. And I'm sure your friends also missed you. So that is a very, very important role through which your bonding with your students is just going to become stronger. Always remember, your role as a teacher cannot be limited. But these 8 different parts that I have talked about are the prerequisites of being a teacher who teaches effectively in a classroom. And let me repeat the 8 roles for you. The controller, the prompter, the resource, the assessor, the organizer, the participant, the tutor or helper, the acquaintance, and moving away from the role of a teacher, I'm now going to talk about the importance of facial gestures and body language. It's very important that we as teachers use less words and more body language, more gestures. Your voice and energy as a teacher is very important, but also remember, when I say your voice is important, I only mean that you don't yell, you don't scream in a classroom, you don't raise your voice to a level which becomes irritating for students and also for the people who are walking outside your classroom. Facial expressions and gestures do magic in the classroom. So as a teacher, you need to make sure your hands are free, your arms are free, you're smiling. You can glare at students if there is a problem. Facial gestures and body language are 3 very important points here that you need to remember. After understanding the role of a teacher, it is very important for you to understand how non-verbal communication helps in a teaching environment or otherwise also. Your body language and gestures are extremely important to put through your message to the listener. After understanding the few roles of a teacher that I've talked about, please also remember how important your non-verbal communication is. Your words should be lesser, your body language and your gestures should be more. If we look at the chart here, the pie chart, it says that 55% of the non-verbal communication is through body movements, face, and arms. 38% is through the tone and pauses, and 7% is through the words. This pie chart clearly indicates how important it is for you as a teacher to use your arms, your facial expressions, and gestures in the classroom. And this is not only for you while you're teaching, this is basically effective when you're communicating to anyone. Imagine if I sit here and talk to you in one tone, don't raise my voice, don't lower my voice, and there's no intonation, how would you feel? Remember, as a teacher, it is very important that you engage your learners through all your intonation, through your body language, through your gestures. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that it is essential that you as a teacher let free your arms and your hands and use expressions in a way that students also understand what you mean when you use that specific gesture. So for example, before we talk more about gestures, there are three important points that I want to make here. The first is that your gestures should be extremely culturally appropriate. Some of the teachers might have traveled in different places or might be coming from a university which has a different type of understanding of culture. For example, maybe there are different cultures involved. But when you're teaching at a set school, for example, SOAR STEM schools, you have to remember that whatever gestures you use are not inappropriate. So for example, the first gesture I want to talk here about is when you point out at someone. Pointing out is extremely inappropriate. So you never point out at someone like this. See how it looks? So if you really have to point out at someone, this is what you do. You put your hand like this. Another body language you could use is listen. So as I said, they have to be very, very appropriate, culturally appropriate. And the other point is have to come naturally to a teacher. So you can't really think, oh, what am I going to do? What kind of body language should I use here? What kind of gesture should I use here? So for example, listen, it's coming natural to me. Like, speak up. Or, no, this is incorrect. Or, well done. So little gestures and little body movements will let the students understand what the teacher is talking about. Also remember that whatever body language, whatever body movements you make, whatever gestures you use need to be consistent. So you can't be saying this one day and having a different body movement the next day because students will not understand. You can also talk about certain points once you start working with those learners. And you could say, okay, when I do this, what does it mean? It means, I want to listen to you when you speak, or talk louder. Okay? So I will talk to you more about this when I do instructional teaching with you in one of the segments. A very important part of the session now. An integral part of a teacher's teaching is how a teacher gives instructions in a classroom. Sing instructions while teaching. The first important way of giving instruction is to remember phrasal verbs. We as teachers use a lot of phrasal verbs in classes. For example, sit down, go out. Remember, if you're using phrasal verbs, the instructions should be clear and properly, completely given. So if you're saying, go through your work, your students should understand what exactly go through means. So do not use phrasal verbs that are not understood by students. Remember, give complete instructions. The second important point to remember here is that as a teacher, you should always give your material first before you give instructions. The whole idea is that if you distribute your material while giving instructions, the students will never understand what they have to do, because half of them will be involved at looking at the material, half of them will be looking at you. So remember, always distribute the material first, and then when everyone has that material, then start giving your instructions to what they have to do with a certain worksheet. The third step you should remember while giving instructions is that you need to break down your instructions. This is called lockstep. So lockstep your instructions instead of giving out all instructions together. Remember, break it down into chunks so that students understand and follow your steps. Right? The fourth one. If you have planned an activity in which there is group work or pair work, always assign the pairs or divide the students into groups before giving instructions. So as soon as they are set for the activity, that's when you give your instructions. The next one. Always position yourself at one certain place while giving instructions. You can't be moving around and giving instructions together. It's very difficult for the participants, for the students to look at you while you're walking. Just look at me. If I talk to you like this, what is happening? It is actually diverting your attention. Position yourself at one place. It could be in front of the classroom, it could be at the back, it could be in the middle, but wherever you want to give your instructions, position yourself at one point. Your instructions need to be very crisp, very simple. So you can't have long instructions. Keep them simple, keep them short, keep them crisp. There are a lot of different ways through which you reinforce instructions. So instead of repeating instructions, so for example, my instruction is, open your book to page number 53. I'm not going to keep on repeating because students will say, what page, miss? I didn't understand. Can you repeat? So instead of repeating over and over again, you could either write it on the board or you could say, what page? And let the students tell you, 53. Or you could say, Ali, what page did I say? 53, right? This part of giving instruction is also called ICQ, which is instruction checking question. So once you give out instruction through your questions, you let the students repeat what the instruction was. The other technique of giving instruction is to check instruction is called CCQ, which is concept checking question. By concept checking question, it simply means that you have given a concept to the students. Instead of asking, do you understand? And whenever you ask that question, you must have noticed that all the heads just go nodding because they dare not say anything else. They all will say yes. They understand or not understand, that's a separate question. But CCQ basically is a technique that is used to check if understanding has really happened. So it is concept checking question. Now, for example, if I say, I'm teaching young children and I say, snowfalls always happens during winters. And my concept checking question is, Will snowfall happen in summers? So you immediately as a teacher would understand whatever I said, was it even comprehended by my learners or not? So 2 important points, ICQ and CCQ. Remember about this. Whenever we assign an activity for students, remember to time that activity. So if there's a written task, always say, spend 20 minutes doing this. Or if there's a discussion point, say, spend 3 minutes, spend 5 minutes talking about this. Always limit the time for an activity. Otherwise, your planning will just go haywire and you will not really be able to control the learning environment of the class. That's about giving instructions. I want you to pause my video again and go back and watch teacher 1 and teacher 2 giving instructions. While you're watching these teachers giving instructions, I want you to make down notes. Compare which teacher gives better instructions, which teacher rushes through, and how these teachers are giving out instructions. Also, think about the impact on the learners in the classroom. Which group of learners do you think will understand the instructions? Which learners do you think are going to get confused? So please watch these 2 teachers now. Thank you for watching these teachers. So did you notice how the first teacher, what she was doing? She distributes the materials first without, beginning of giving instructions. She also uses extremely simple language. Her language is very, very clear. This teacher also breaks down the instructions into parts so that she's not stretching out long sentences. Teacher 1 uses extremely effective body language. She points out, she touches her ears to make sure everyone is listening to her. She uses the board when required. And she also checks understanding of instruction. That's what teacher 1 does. What happens to teacher 2? Teacher 2 stands up there and uses long sentences. So she says words like, oh, you will be able to do this exercise that I think you will love. It will be a bit tricky. I think you will love. She's already confusing the students. It will be a bit tricky. Oh my God, she's already telling the students, half of you won't be able to do it because this is only for the smart ones. So remember, clarity of language. Think about distributing materials. Now this teacher too is consistently, distributing material while she's talking. And students will be extremely confused in her class. There were no proper pairs made. So this teacher just says, pair up yourself. And the students might really not know how to pair, or some of them would just rush to their friends to pair up. The teacher uses language which is unclear. The teacher does not set any specific time for an activity because she just says, I'm not too sure if you have enough time to do this activity. Absolute confusion in the classroom. Her instructions are very long. She's talking and talking and talking and talking without any break. She looks absolutely, totally confused. And I'm sure you will agree that her set of students in that classroom would be as confused as she looks. So reflect upon the kind of instructions that are given in the classroom. I've spoken about the importance of the teachers, the role of the teachers while teaching in the classroom. I will also talk to you about the importance of giving instructions. Now, I will point out to how the teachers create hindrances while teaching effectively. So, now, talking about the hindrances of teaching. Number 1, the biggest hindrance that teachers themselves create while teaching is the TTT, the teacher talk time, versus STT, the student talk time. I have been consistently saying that as a teacher, the center of attention cannot just be you, right? So the interaction should be between the teacher and the students with other students. The talk time needs to be reduced to the minimum. Research says 80% students talk and 20% teachers talk. Only then the classroom becomes an active learning place for students. I'm not saying that you don't deliver a concept. I'm not saying you don't teach. All I am saying is that the approach needs to engage learners through teaching, right? And as I said, when we do the instructional practices, the way you are required to teach in a classroom, we'll cover more of this. So remember, 80% students speak, 20% the teacher speaks. Whenever there is noise in the classroom, whenever there is healthy discussion going on, that classroom is an active, happy classroom. A quiet classroom can be compared to a graveyard. Unless and until the students are attempting a test, unless and until they're doing a task, a written task, it's absolutely fine that there is healthy noise, a healthy environment. The second hindrance teachers create, and they don't realize, is echo. What is echo? I'll give you an example. So, as a teacher, I ask a question. What did you all do last night? And Heather says, I went for a family dinner. And I say, oh, so you went for a family dinner. Sarah, what did you do last night? Oh, I watched a movie. Oh, so you watched a movie. So what is the teacher doing? She's echoing, repeating information that has been said by a certain student. Echoing is the greatest hindrance because students will only look at you for reconfirmation of information and will stop listening to other friends. Stop doing that, please. You will have to practice not to echo. The third important point is unclear instructions. I've already talked to you about instructions. I've already said how important it is to give clear instructions. The next important part is a fear that teachers would have while giving genuine feedback. Genuine feedback, you should be able to accept and you should be able to act upon a feedback that's given. So for example, remember the feedback, when you give the feedback, it is for the developmental needs of the student. When you receive a feedback from your head or from your colleague, remember it should be constructive and it should be also for your developmental needs. By being genuine, it means do not point out only for the sake of pointing out mistakes. If you feel that a piece of work cannot be improved, just say it to the student. Oh my God, you have done a remarkable job. I absolutely love the different words you have used. I am so happy you can use these words. Again, tell the students what this student has done well. However, here, there is another hindrance, and another hindrance is over politeness and over helping. When the teachers keep on supporting students without any requirement by the students, remember your role? Facilitator. Not someone who's consistently on a student's head to pressurize him, not to push him. So, moving around while the students are doing tasks, you don't have to go on saying, do you need help? Can I help you? Oh, do you want me to do this for you? Let the students do the task. Remember, you are a resource and a prompter. You cannot push yourself to help students. Let them ask you. Let them turn to you and ask for support. So over politeness and over helping. By over politeness, I'm not saying you become discourteous as a teacher. Of course, you're the role model. Over politeness is when you're like you're not firm. And if you're not firm and friendly, the students will take you for a ride. So remember, be a teacher who's firm yet very friendly. At times, teachers are less confident. So they have less confidence. And this only occurs when you as a teacher feel that you have insufficient knowledge or you are unsure of a certain part that you're going to teach. Please get immediate support. None of us are perfect. None of us. We all have to work extremely hard. And remember, you are responsible to nurture these students in front of you. So any piece of information that goes out from you needs to be authentic, needs to be correct. Only be confident, and you need to make sure that you have prepared in advance. That will only boost your confidence. If you're in an observation, if someone has walked into your class to observe you, don't worry. Remember, the observer is there to help you develop professionally. Moving on from this, another hindrance while teaching is running commentary. Now, by running commentary, you've seen an example in one of the videos, Teacher 2, what kind of running commentary was. When a teacher starts off and goes on and on and on and on and on, without any break, without pausing, without checking learners' understanding, another major hindrance. Remember the concentration span? It's not that great. So the students will not be able to listen to everything that you're saying. Avoid running commentary. One major mistake that teachers make is they concentrate on few, or they concentrate on one or two students who would always give the correct answer. Never do that. As a teacher, you're responsible for every individual who is sitting in your classroom. So remember to walk around, and also if you have given a chance to someone to speak, give a chance to someone else. But if that student can't give an answer, never reprimand that student, but always say, okay, can I have Zahid answer this for him? Or Zara, can you please help him? So that there is motivation, so that there is peer support. One major area that I've also identified is the difference between language and message. As a teacher, we need to focus on the message the student is trying to put across to us, not 100% the language. Now this goes out to all the English or the Urdu language teachers. For example, if a student comes to me and says, at 12, at noon, the student says, "Good morning, miss." And I look at the student and say, "Oh, no, darling, it's good afternoon." What am I doing? I've blocked the message right there and then. The student would not like to talk to me about it. Why the student didn't walk into my classroom. Remember, let the student say out the message, even if the language is not correct. Or another example can be grammatical incorrection. So maybe the student says, "I went to the doctor tomorrow." So here the student is either trying to say he will go to the doctor tomorrow or he has already visited, right? Because the tense error. Clarify. Do not point out to the mistake. Only focus on the message the student is trying to put across. A major hindrance while teaching is when a teacher does not have a strong rapport with students, has a weak rapport. And because of the weak rapport, the students just don't want to listen to the teacher. By being firm in a classroom, you will never be able to develop a healthy bonding with your students, which is the crux of being a teacher. Work on yourselves. Another major hindrance while teaching can also be a weak environment or a poor working environment, which means there's no electricity in the classroom. And it's so hot that the students just can't listen to you. And they're all sweating, so it's not their fault. In those times, be friendly and try to maybe revise something, involve them in activities, for example, healthy competition, a quiz. So instead of pushing the students all the time, think about how you as a teacher will strengthen the students' understanding. After this video ends, there is some additional reading material based on the roles of teacher. I would recommend that you read that after you finish watching the video. I know this profession we're all in is extremely taxing, but whenever you get tired, this note is for you. It says, "Dear tired teacher, when the expectations begin to feel impossible, remember, because of you today, someone smiled, made connection, became more confident, and felt loved. Don't give up. Don't give up because there are certain conditions you've been through. You've taken up teaching as a profession, make it your passion and move on positively." Before I end this session today, there are two more videos I would want you to watch. One of them is about the teaching in 21st century, and the other one will motivate you to continue this profession with a lot of passion. It's called Teachers Can Make a Difference. With this, I wind up the session for today. Please take good care of yourselves and think about your learning from this session. All the best. After this video ends, there is some additional reading material based on the roles of teacher. I would recommend that you read that after you finish watching the video.